Hello, it's Miss Seichter. I'll be showing you how to make a one-point perspective ink and watercolor painting. By now you'll be familiar with one-point perspective and how to draw in perspective. You'll have to look at your preliminary sketches and other resource material that will help guide your drawing. You can find photo references online, but you must change them so that you are not plagiarizing someone else's photography. You can use photos you've taken yourself and not have to worry about that. Or you could go onto Google Maps and take screenshots of existing places and get different street views of towns and cityscapes. I use a combination of screenshots I've taken from Google Maps and picture references that were posted online that help me find other objects to populate my landscape with, like plants and people. I'm starting my rough draft on regular drawing paper, and I will be tracing this onto my final copy watercolor paper. When starting one-point perspective, always start with your horizon line and then place your vanishing point on that horizon line. Now, based on my picture reference, my vanishing point may be way off the paper. I can choose to adjust this by drawing the vanishing point at the very edge of my paper, or I could extend that by adding an extra piece of paper that allows me to reference a vanishing point that's way off of my paper plane. Now remember not to remove this piece of paper until you're done with the entire line drawing of your project. One-point perspective usually involves looking at a wall of a building that is facing you. And my landscape doesn't really have much of that going on. I'm mostly looking at the sides of my building that are slanted away from me. These are my orthogonal or converging lines that meet at that faraway vanishing point. This building, however, has a wall facing me and reminds me that we are working in one-point perspective because that wall is facing us. And I'll start by drawing my orthogonal lines at the very top and bottom of my drawing. And from there, I can break up those orthogonal lines into smaller sections with my vertical lines. My space has been mapped out as accurately as it can be according to the rules of perspective. Now I will be populating the landscape with life, such as plants, animals, people, and forms of transportation. I'll also be seeing how else I can change my drawing from the original screenshot as much as I can. So I will be looking up many pictures for inspiration so that I can see what kinds of plants would look good in a setting like this. I'm going to borrow a few pictures here and there and put them all together until my composition is kind of a collage of different sources so that it's more original. I've finished drawing my rough draft on my regular drawing paper, and now it's time for me to transfer this onto my watercolor paper for my final draft. And the reason why I started on this drawing paper first is because there are many, many orthogonal lines that meet at that vanishing point, which means there are lots of lines that need to be erased, like here or here, and watercolor paper is not very forgiving with this type of thing. So there are several ways to do this. One way is using a light board or a tracing board. Another way that you can easily do this at home is by taping your roughed draft onto a window during daytime and taping your watercolor paper on top of that and letting the natural daylight shine through so that you can use your window as a makeshift tracing board. Another way of doing this is tracing paper. And in doing tracing paper, it's a little bit more time consuming, but something you can easily do at home. It involves you going over all of the lines you just drew and tracing it a second time. Once I have my graphite on this paper, I'm able to transfer it onto my watercolor paper by several different ways. My drawing is now on my tracing paper, and in order to get my drawing from my tracing paper onto my final draft paper, I have a couple options. And again, the reason why we're going through this process is because we don't want to have to go in and erase all of our mistakes on watercolor paper, especially since watercolors are a little bit see-through and all of your mistakes will still be visible. This way around, you can transfer your image in a very soft, subtle way. So since this is the side with my graphite, it's very important to keep track of which side has your graphite. I can flip it upside down so it is graphite side down and trace everything from the back, and that pushes the graphite onto the paper. And since we have drawn our perspective project for so long the other way, seeing it backwards might be a little jarring, and you may not necessarily like how it looks right away. Sometimes when you flip an image, some of your mistakes are highlighted a little bit more noticeably because you were used to looking at it from a certain perspective for so long. So you can choose to trace it this way so that you have a flipped image from what you started and trace it right from the back in order to press that graphite in. Or you could scribble on the back so that there is a thin layer of graphite on the whole thing. This really works best if you have a wooden pencil, not a mechanical pencil, because you're able to use the side of your pencil to cover a wider area. And you want a solid layer around the whole thing. So it's going to take you a little bit of time, but also you trace your whole design a few less times if you do it this way, and your image is transferred in the correct orientation from what you intended. And this is just how you use tracing paper to transfer. If you're able to use a tracing board or possibly a window to transfer, that is another good way to do it, and it might save you a little bit more time. But looking at it from this side, since I know I want my image to be right side forward how I originally drew it, I can retrace over my exact image one last time. And this is when it's important to press really hard. You don't want to press so hard that your hand gets tired too soon, but you do want to make sure that you're really pushing the even layer of graphite on the other side onto your watercolor paper. And you want to be very precise with how exact you are with your lines, because if you make a line that goes off, that itself will transfer. And if I give us a sneak peek of what is transferring on the other side, I have the beginnings of my project transferred onto this. It's still graphite. It can still erase if I go over it or if I don't like something. But this is how you can get your final image on your watercolor paper in a way that is very soft and subtle to your watercolor paper and doesn't leave big mistakes noticeable and big erase lines. Now that I'm done transferring, I'm going to use a waterproof pen to go in and outline my lines so that they stand out when I go over everything with my watercolor wash. Some of those pens can be a thin Sharpie. Some people have been known to use calligraphy pens, but you can also use other waterproof pens as well, like microns right here. And these are interesting because they come in a variety of widths to the tip, depending on what number they are given. But you are able to create some line weight or line quality with a thin Sharpie, depending on how you hold it. Now, you do want to go for making some thick lines and some thin lines for some line variation in line weight. So if you have other waterproof pens that can get you multiple different widths, that can work. But with thin Sharpies, if you hold down your marker for longer, it will create a wider line. So that means that objects up close are best outlined with thicker lines. It makes them stand out more. It makes them appear that they are closer. But if you are too hesitant with your pen, like in small, far away areas, that might work against you if you're working too slow. Other ways you can create some line weight, and it really is not that noticeable unless you take a close look, is to speed up your lines or hold your thin Sharpie to more of a angle. And you can create a little bit of line weight with this tool. If you're drawing your straight lines, like your orthogonal lines, it's still best to go in with a ruler, because even if you think you have a steady hand, that straight line is not going to appear as straight as you want it to be. You can also incorporate, in addition to line quality or line variation, something called an implied line. And that is when a line gets really, really thin, becomes invisible, and then continues onward. That's something that might create some interest or emphasis in your design while you're outlining with Sharpie. Now that my drawing is outlined, I need to use as much pen as possible to create a range of values. Value is the lightness or darkness in a picture and helps a drawing look more realistic, more 3D, and shows us where the light source is coming from. So I need to practice mark making because pen does not shade like pencil does. Mark making can not only show dark and light areas in your drawing, but it can also create texture. And it's important to maybe incorporate a couple different types of mark making techniques. So I can choose stippling, hatching, cross hatching, or scumbling, or I could pick multiple depending on what I am trying to add texture to. For example, my trees, might look really good if I do scumbling or stippling. For example, these shadowy areas in the alleyway might be just hatching to follow the edges of the building itself. Now, stippling involves lots of dots. The closer the dots, the darker that value will appear, and the further apart, the lighter. A positive in using this in the pen drawing is it will appear much more clean and show more control with your tool. You're less likely to go outside the lines that you want it to. The negative is it takes you a really long time. Now with hatching, it involves lines that go in a single direction, and you can still build up many layers with that. It's good for accentuating which direction your object flows. So I could follow the contours of some of these pots right here. A negative is if you go outside the lines, it's pretty noticeable. Then I have cross hatching, and it's much like hatching, but I crisscross those lines. And again, I can build up multiple layers to create some of those darker values and use less crisscrossing layers for lighter values. And a positive for that is it's a quick way to build up dark and light values in your drawing. It's time efficient, but it's very easy to make it look messy because it's very easy for you to go outside the lines, and it's just a messier texture. And then there's scumbling or scribbling, and that is really good for things like trees, as I said, but it will make other areas of your design look like it has that same tree texture. So I would use it sparingly and in a smart way. So I'm going to use a variety of these mark making techniques in my drawing.